Our next guest is the newly appointed leader of the Social Democrats, despite having entered politics only 5 years ago.
Here to chat about her political career and plans for the party is Cork Southwest TD, Holly Cairns. Good morning, Holly. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great.
It's great to finally have you in here because you've been going around chatting and it's been a meteoric, do we have to use the word meteoric rise for you? So we're here to chat to you and chat about how it's all... Like 5 years ago, you weren't involved in politics, 5-6 years ago. And now you're the leader of the Social Democrats. So did you have a party political background? Were you really into it in college?
Absolutely not. Had no interest in politics. I finished school in 2008, so it was kind of crash time. And I think I actually thought that the word like political party was nearly a dirty word. I was fairly disillusioned with Irish politics, and like lots of my friends, I emigrated. And the only time I remember kind of feeling engaged in politics was around like a presidential election and thinking, oh, like Michael D or David Norris would be great for bringing in marriage equality. You know, that was kind of like just fleeting. And then I was living and working abroad in Malta, actually, working in disability support services. And the marriage equality referendum was coming around here. And I knew I wanted to move home and take on my family farm and business. So I went back a bit earlier to vote. And then I was working away, and it wasn't until the repeal referendum came around that I got really engaged in that. And for me, even though everyone else knows this, it was kind of a light bulb moment in terms of, OK, knocking on doors, asking for votes, that's actually how you affect change. You know, we have this democratic process. And I knew from knocking on those doors in my own constituency in Cork Southwest that people wanted a progressive alternative. And we've always seen our governments kind of being dragged along by the people for progressive change, instead of having a government who might actually try and lead a change like that. And I just thought, you know, people would always say, particularly around rural areas, oh, people in rural areas are just conservative by default. And from knocking on the doors, for one, I knew that wasn't true. And for two, I find it kind of insulting that just because we're from a rural area, you know, that we might not understand facts or something like that. Yep. So I just knew that there was space there for something different. I felt unrepresented. And me and two women who I met canvassing, I'd never known them before in West Cork, we formed a branch of the Social Democrats. And it all happened very quickly there. You said 5 years ago. It was 4 years ago I first got onto Cork County Council. And yeah, I always tell people that's during my first ever election in 2019 for the locals. I was told I had to hope, obviously, laughed at.
Yeah.
But my first election, I lost by one vote. I called a recount and I won by one vote. So just for any of your viewers, don't ever doubt the importance of your vote. If there wasn't for that one vote, I wouldn't have gotten the council seat, and I probably wouldn't have gone on 7 months later to get the Dublin seat.
Like it's a fantastic story, and even like the fact that you talk about emigrating because it was the crash and you had to leave, you couldn't get a job. Like it just ticks so many boxes with so many people. You talk about rural Ireland missing out and so many not taken serious, and you can see why, since you've been voted in head of the party, how the support has doubled in such a short period of time. Do you think that that's the sort of like generation you're trying to go at? You're trying to get young people involved in politics? The fact that, you know, your agriculture background, you didn't really see that as a future, but so many young people do have to start really thinking, like, how are we going to get change? Particularly when you see what happened in the coalition over the last few days with the rent situation.
That's it. And I think for a party like ours to grow more, and that's what we really need to do in order to have an impact on the next government. You know, we want to go into government, but we need that critical mass to have influence on it. So I do want to reach people who, like me, maybe don't feel like politics feels them or hears them or represents them. And I want to ask them to reconsider. And consider, it could be anything from, you know, knocking on doors, just becoming a member, asking somebody else to vote, encouraging somebody to register, to being a candidate, to being a campaign manager. I hope I'll be well placed to reach those people, because I was that person only 4 years ago, looking at politicians on things like this and being like, excuse me, I don't feel represented. But I also think that those issues around housing and disability services and all of the things that I feel strongly about, yes, I think that there's, you know, people my age with generation housing crisis, you know, I hope I can reach them. But also, like, my parents' age, my grandparents' age, don't want to see another generation immigrating and seeing, you know, their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren growing up in New Zealand or Australia or somewhere else. So I think that the issues that are facing my generation are having a profound impact on everybody.
Do you think, because what's your leader's question, like, do you think the current government, they're letting down that young generation?
Absolutely.
Every generation. I don't think it's just a young generation. I think
Yeah.
there's people who are now 50 years old and they can't buy a house. They don't know where they're going to go in 20 years' time.
Exactly. Maybe looking at a notice to quit and, you know, with the ban. And, like, I think that the thing that we've all felt for so long is that there isn't a real, meaningful effort to address the biggest issue facing us as a country at the moment, which is the housing crisis.
Yeah.
And this week, I think a lot, the frustration and the disillusionment is real. But it's also just a wake-up call. Like, they're not even pretending anymore. They're not even
What do you mean by that?
pretending. Well, lifting an eviction ban in the middle of a housing crisis when we know there's about 3,000 homes who will be evicted now. There's 12,000 people who are homeless. And 3,000 homes, we don't know how many people that is. So they're talking about all of the, you know, the potential consequences of this, the unforeseen, the unknown, unintended. But they're prioritising that over the intended, known consequence of forcing people, thousands of people, into homelessness and saying themselves, yeah, like, that will happen and that's going to be difficult to defend.
Their argument is, though, that if we don't do this, then we extend it for 6 months, then we have to go to the Constitution. We're making people homeless in winter. We're coming into summer months and we don't want to lose the landlords. That's their argument.
That's their argument. But look, the lobbying from landlords has clearly worked, and I think that's plain to see. But also, in terms of it being unconstitutional, they can't constantly be leaning on supposed advice from the AG when, crucially, if they said, well, in a particular mitigating circumstance, perhaps it could be revisited, that would make it constitutional, perhaps. Why haven't they explored that?
I mean, listen, it's really interesting, and there's so many other parties and people obviously agree with this.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, with the opposition, it's easy to be able to push those questions. But for you, with Social Democrats, as you say, you have to grow. So if you want to make change, you're going to have to go into coalition with another party. Would you look to the likes of Sinn Féin? Would you look to one of the other parties to go into coalition with, if it meant you got into power and to make change?
I would talk to all parties about going to government. Like I said, we really want to go into government. I didn't go into politics to go into opposition, although I've realised the importance of opposition in it. It's so important to have people there holding government to account. Crucially, we want to implement our policies. In Ireland, we always look over to countries like Sweden and Denmark and go, oh, in Sweden and Denmark, there's no reason we can't be counted among those countries in terms of having a socially democratic government. That is the aim.
Would you fit alongside the likes of Fine Gael, though, Social Democrats of Fine Gael? Like,
this is it. So
we see what's happened to the Green Party every single time that they go into a partnership with the big boys. It does feel like their policies. We had Nessa Horgan sitting here from the Green Party, railing against her coalition partners and her own party, and it feels like she's like, these are not Green Party principles. So do you worry about your principles having to be washed away?
That's the key, isn't it? So you need that critical mass. We need more TDs so we have a profound impact on a government. But yes, and I think one of the things that I found confusing before I went into politics is the actual spectrum of political parties in Ireland. And yes, for us, Fine Gael would be at the opposite end of a spectrum of left and right in terms of how compatible our policies would be, and it is difficult to see how we could form a government with them as a result of that. But we would talk to every party and drive a hard bargain. But for some of your viewers, just to explain that, like, the principles of our party is that it is necessary for the state to intervene where there's market failure. So things like health and housing, we believe, shouldn't be left to the private market, because private businesses don't have a social contract with you or with anyone at home. They are there to make money. The state has a responsibility to the people. And Fine Gael's position is that they privatise things and leave things up to the private market, and it's make your own way. So the floor beneath which people can fall below in terms of poverty is so low. You can be homeless, you can be unable to access healthcare.
Yeah. We've seen on the papers today the cuckoo funds who were like, well, we're going to leave if we can't do it. But
how important is it to have females in government at the minute? I think it's only 27% of female members are in the Dáil at the minute. But if you look at the 6 main parties, 3 of their leaders are females. Do you think that it needs to change? It is International Women's Day after all. Do you think for the government to go forward, you need to have a more female voice in there?
Yeah, I think the key's in the word public representative. And so we're all public representatives. We represent the people in our constituencies. And then you see, 50% of the population don't seem to be very well represented. So, for example, in all of Cork City and County, you know, the biggest county in the country, there's 18 TDs and I'm not sure how many senators. One woman, I'm the only woman representing all of Cork.
Why is that?
I think, you know, there's loads of structural barriers that we could talk about in terms of, like, you know, maternity leave for county and city councillors was only introduced this year. There's still no provision for TDs. There's structural barriers, but crucially, the honest truth is what it comes down to is after every election you see 30-something seats for Fianna Fáil, 30-something seats for Fine Gael, this for the other parties. And those parties are returning the public reps basically every year.
Yep.
And they find it very hard to engage women in their politics. And we've seen this. I remember seeing 100,000 spent on Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael trying to encourage women to politics, but it's not working.
But is there an element here? Because I do know that in the Dáil, for an awful lot of the male sitting TDs, their female partners, I mean their wives, do a huge amount of work, right? That's just a lot of stuff goes on behind the scenes if you're into the politics. The amount of work they do is unbelievable, unpaid work like they are now. When you're a woman putting yourself forward, an awful lot of these people are politically engaged. The people who are going around knocking on doors, a lot of them are women.
Yeah.
It's putting yourself out there because you felt it, that you're just going to be attacked. And let's be honest, sometimes you just want to take a back seat, you want to be engaged, but you don't want to be the figurehead where you're going to be getting rape threats from people who don't like the fact that you're a woman who has a mouth and is actually letting words come out of it.
100%. And look, I remember being at a UCC politics event and there was all of the elected women in Cork there, so councillors mainly because there's only one TD, but every single woman except one had to be asked. So I do want to say to people who are at home, reconsider. If you think it's not for you, think again. And because those threats, and yes, women get a particular type of abuse in politics, the only way that we can help to address that is by getting more women into politics. And we need it for better decision making, because I think we'd have the same thing if there just so happened to be way more women than men in the profession.
But it has to
we'd
affect,
probably have an unbalanced policy.
It has to affect you, Holly. Like, it has to get to you, the sort of abuse. Like, I've seen it. I've gone online. I've seen what's said to you. That sometimes you might be like, I'm just done. Like, we've seen Jacinda Ardern, we've seen Nicola Sturgeon go, I'm out of here, lads. And a lot of it had to do with abuse. Like, do you think something has to be done going, right, we're finding those accounts?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of those faceless, nameless, email-less accounts, which is the vast majority of the ones who troll women online, there absolutely needs to be something done in relation to that. And there's contradicting views in terms of the need for anonymity, for whistleblowing, but there are other ways we can address that without allowing this kind of nonsense to go on online. It's like the Wild West out there. But I do think that the answer to it is to get more women in. That is the key. We do need, there's so few of us in it at the moment that you could think even more targeted abuse.
Yeah.
Well, listen,
we can spread it out amongst us all.
What you're doing is certainly getting a lot more people interested in politics, and continued success to you as well, leader of the Social Democrats, Holly Cairns.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming in and talking to us this morning. Cheers.